The dust from the stagecoach had barely settled when Clara Brennan realized that Theodore Whitmore, owner of the Silver Spur Saloon, had no intention of paying her the $60 he owed for 3 months of cooking, cleaning, and keeping his establishment respectable in the harsh summer of 1878 in Tombstone, Arizona territory. Clara stood in the cramped office behind the saloon, her calico dress sticking to her back in the oppressive heat, watching Whitmore count gold coins into his personal safe. Her hands trembled with barely contained rage as he turned to face her with that oily smile she had grown to despise. "Mr. Whitmore, it has been 3 months since I started working here. You promised me $20 a month, and I have not seen a single cent," Clara said, forcing her voice to remain steady despite the fury building in her chest. Whitmore leaned back in his leather chair, the wood creaking under his considerable weight. He was a portly man with thinning hair slicked back with too much pomade, and his eyes held the calculating coldness of someone who had cheated many people before her. "Now, Clara, business has been slow. You know how it is, I will pay you when I can spare the funds." "I just watched you count over $300, Clara countered, her green eyes flashing. "The saloon has been packed every single night. The miners come in straight from the silver claims and spend their wages freely." "Do not treat me like a fool." His expression hardened, and Clara saw the true nature of the man beneath the false politeness. "You will get your wages when I decide you have earned them, girl, and if you keep pressing me, you will find yourself out on the street with nothing at all. There are plenty of women in this territory who would be grateful for the work." Clara's heart sank. She had come to Tombstone 6 months ago after her father died of consumption back in Missouri, leaving her with nothing but debts. She had used the last of her money to make the journey west, hoping for a fresh start. The job at the Silver Spur had been her lifeline, and Whitmore knew it. He had been counting on her desperation from the very beginning. "I need that money, Mr. Whitmore. I have rent to pay at the boarding house, and I have barely eaten in weeks," Clara said, hating the pleading note that crept into her voice. "That sounds like a personal problem," Whitmore replied, turning back to his ledger as if dismissing her entirely. "Now get back to work. Those dishes are not going to wash themselves." Clara left the office with tears burning in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She had survived too much to break now. As she returned to the kitchen, scrubbing plates crusted with the remains of meals she could not afford to eat herself, she made a silent vow that Theodore Whitmore would pay her every penny he owed, one way or another. That evening, as Clara wiped down the bar after closing, a man she had never seen before pushed through the saloon doors. Most of the lamps had been extinguished, leaving the room in shadows, but she could make out his silhouette against the moonlight streaming through the windows. He was tall and lean, wearing dusty traveling clothes and a wide-brimmed hat pulled low over his face. "We are closed," Clara called out, exhaustion making her voice sharper than she intended. The man removed his hat, revealing dark hair and a face that looked to be in his late 20s, weathered by sun and wind but undeniably handsome. His eyes were a startling blue, almost gray in the dim light, and they held an intensity that made Clara straighten her spine. "I am looking for work," he said, his voice low and measured. "Heard Whitmore might need a hand with security. There has been trouble with some of the miners getting rowdy." Clara almost laughed at the absurdity of it. "If you are looking for honest employment, I would suggest you look elsewhere. Theodore Whitmore is not a man who keeps his promises." The stranger's eyes sharpened with interest as he stepped further into the room. "Is that so? What has he done?" Clara hesitated. She did not know this man, and for all she knew, he could be a friend of Whitmore's sent to test her loyalty. But there was something in his demeanor, a quiet strength that made her want to trust him, and she was so tired of carrying the burden alone. "He owes me 3 months' wages and refuses to pay," Clara said simply. $60 that I worked hard to earn, and he acts as though I should be grateful he lets me work at all." The stranger's jaw tightened, and Clara saw anger flash across his features before he controlled it. He set his hat on the bar and extended his hand toward her. "My name is James Cordell. And I think you and I might be able to help each other, Miss Clara Brennan," she replied, shaking his hand. His grip was firm and warm, calloused from years of hard work. "What do you mean, help each other?" James glanced toward the closed office door, then back at Clara. "I have been tracking Theodore Whitmore for the better part of a year. He ran a similar operation in Prescott before coming here, cheated a dozen workers out of their wages before disappearing in the night with everything of value. One of those workers was my younger sister, Sarah. She was 16 and trying to make her way after our parents passed. Whitmore's theft left her destitute, and she ended up getting sick that winter. She did not survive." Clara felt her heart constrict with sympathy and understanding. "I am so sorry for your loss. Whitmore has been doing this for years, moving from town to town, exploiting desperate people and disappearing before anyone can hold him accountable," James continued, his voice hard with controlled fury. "But I found him here, and I intend to make sure he faces consequences for what he has done. If he owes you money, I will get it back for you, along with what he owes others." "How?" Clara asked, though part of her was afraid of the answer. "By making him understand that he cannot run anymore," James said, "but I need information. I need to know his habits when he is alone, where he keeps his money, who his associates are. You work here. You would know these things." Clara should have been frightened by the barely concealed menace in James's words, but instead she felt a fierce satisfaction. Theodore Whitmore had counted on her powerlessness, but she was not powerless anymore. "The safe is in his office. He counts his earnings every night after closing and locks them away. He usually leaves through the back door around 1 in the morning and walks to his house on Allen Street. He travels alone because he is too cheap to pay for security." James nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving her face. "Does he carry a weapon?" "A pistol in his coat pocket, but I have never seen him use it," Clara answered. "Mr. Cordell, what exactly are you planning to do?" "I am planning to have a conversation with him," James said carefully. "A conversation where he understands that his actions have consequences. But I will not do anything that puts you at risk, Clara. If you want no part of this, I understand." Clara thought about the months of hunger, of scrubbing floors until her hands bled, of being treated like she was worth less than nothing. She thought about James's sister, dead because a greedy man valued money more than human life. "I want every penny he owes me. And I want him to know he cannot do this to people without answering for it." A slow smile crossed James's face, transforming his stern features into something warmer. "Then we have an understanding." Over the next 3 days, Clara and James formed an unlikely partnership. He would arrive at the saloon late in the evening, taking a table in the corner where he could watch Whitmore's movements without drawing attention. Clara would bring him coffee and quietly share information about the saloon owner's routine, his associates, and the layout of the building. With each conversation, Clara found herself increasingly drawn to James. There was a steadiness about him, a sense of purpose that she admired. He treated her with respect, listening carefully to everything she said and never dismissing her observations. On the 3rd night, as Clara cleared James's table, he caught her hand gently. "I want you to know that whatever happens tomorrow, you have done more than enough. You do not owe me anything, and I do not want you involved in any danger." The warmth of his hand sent an unexpected flutter through Clara's chest. "I have spent months feeling helpless. I need to see this through." James's thumb brushed across her knuckles in a gesture that felt both comforting and intimate. "You are not helpless, Clara. You are one of the strongest women I have ever met. It takes courage to stand up for yourself the way you have." Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the stuffy saloon air. "You barely know me." "I know enough," James said softly. "I know you have survived things that would break most people. I know you have held onto your dignity in a situation designed to strip it away. And I know that when this is over, I would very much like the chance to know you better." Before Clara could respond, Whitmore's voice bellowed from the office, demanding she come clean up a spill. James released her hand reluctantly, and Clara hurried away, her heart pounding in a way that had nothing to do with fear. The next evening unfolded according to their plan. Clara worked her usual shift, though her nerves were strung so tight she thought she might shatter. James was not in the saloon, as they had agreed it would be too suspicious, but she knew he was waiting outside in the shadows. When the last patron finally stumbled out into the night and Whitmore began his nightly counting ritual, Clara finished her cleaning quickly. She left through the front door as she always did, but instead of heading toward the boarding house, she circled around to the alley behind the saloon. James was already there, a darker shadow among shadows. He touched her arm briefly and she could feel the tension in him. "Stay here. If anything goes wrong, you run. Do you understand? Be careful," Clara whispered, surprising herself by reaching up to touch his face. Even in the darkness, she could see his expression soften. "I will," he promised, then moved silently toward the back door of the saloon. Clara waited in the alley, her heart hammering so loudly she was certain someone would hear it. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. She strained to hear anything from inside the saloon, but the thick adobe walls muffled all sound. Just when she thought she could not bear the suspense any longer, the back door opened and James emerged with Whitmore stumbling ahead of him. The saloon owner's face was pale with fear, and his hands were bound in front of him with rope. James had one hand firmly on Whitmore's shoulder, guiding him into the alley. When Whitmore saw Clara, his expression twisted with rage and betrayal. "You little traitor. I gave you a job when no one else would hire you," Whitmore spat. "You exploited me and lied to me," Clara shot back, stepping forward. "You owe me $60 and I want it now." James produced a leather satchel that Clara recognized as Whitmore's money bag. "This contains approximately $400. Clara's 60 comes first. Then I am taking $200 for my sister Sarah, who died because of your theft. The rest will be distributed to the other workers you have cheated in this town. I have already spoken to the cook at the hotel and the man who repairs your roof. They both have stories similar to Clara's. You cannot do this. This is robbery," Whitmore protested, his voice rising toward a shout. In one fluid motion, James pulled Whitmore deeper into the shadows of the alley. His voice dropped to a tone that made even Clara shiver. "What you did is robbery. What I am doing is justice. And if you make any more noise, I will ensure that every person in Tombstone knows exactly what kind of man you are. I have documented evidence of your crimes in 3 different towns. I wonder how Sheriff Behan would feel about a man who has been systematically stealing from the citizens in his jurisdiction." Whitmore's bluster deflated immediately. "Please, I need that money to live. I have debts." "Then perhaps you should have thought of that before you stole from people who needed their wages to survive," James said coldly. He opened the satchel and counted out $60 in coins and bills, pressing them into Clara's trembling hands. The weight of the money felt surreal after months of having nothing. James continued counting, setting aside piles for the others Whitmore had wronged. When he finished, he looked at the saloon owner with undisguised contempt. "You are going to leave Tombstone tonight. You are going to take what is left in this bag and you are going to disappear. Because if I ever hear of you pulling this scheme again in any town, I will find you, and next time I will not be so generous. Do you understand me?" Whitmore nodded frantically, sweat pouring down his face despite the cool night air. James cut the ropes binding his hands and stepped back. "Go." The saloon owner nearly fell in his haste to escape, stumbling down the alley and disappearing into the night. Clara watched him go, clutching her wages to her chest, feeling as though a massive weight had been lifted from her shoulders. James turned to her, his expression softening with concern. "Are you all right?" Clara laughed, the sound slightly hysterical. "I am better than all right." "I cannot believe we actually did it." "You did it," James corrected gently. "You stood up for yourself. I just helped even the odds." Impulsively, Clara threw her arms around him, hugging him tightly. James stiffened for a moment in surprise, then his arms came around her, holding her close. Clara could feel the steady beat of his heart against her cheek, could smell leather and sage and something uniquely him. When she pulled back, intending to thank him properly, she found his face very close to hers. "Clara," James said softly, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. "I know this is not the right time or place, but I need you to know that these past few days with you have been the first time in a year that I have felt anything besides anger. You remind me that there is still goodness in the world worth fighting for." Clara's breath caught in her throat. "James, I feel the same way. You made me feel strong again, like I matter." "You matter," James said fiercely. "You matter so much." When he kissed her, it was gentle and seeking, asking a question that Clara answered by kissing him back. Her hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, and the kiss deepened into something that spoke of loneliness finally ended and connection unexpectedly found. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "I should probably walk you back to your boarding house," James said, his voice rougher than before. "It is late." "Where are you staying?" Clara asked, reluctant to let him go. "I have been camping outside of town," James admitted. "I did not want to spend money on a hotel when I was not sure how long this would take." Clara made a decision that would have shocked her just days ago. "The boarding house where I stay has a spare room. It is not much, but the landlady is kind and the price is reasonable. You could get a proper night's sleep for once." James smiled, and Clara thought it transformed his entire face, making him look younger and less burdened. "I would like that very much." They walked through the quiet streets of Tombstone together, Clara's hand tucked into the crook of James's arm. She was acutely aware of his presence beside her, the solid warmth of him, the way he matched his stride to hers. When they reached the boarding house, Clara retrieved the spare key from under a flower pot as the landlady had shown her and let them inside quietly. The house was dark and still, all the other residents long since asleep. Clara led James upstairs to the vacant room next to hers, suddenly feeling shy. "It is not much," she whispered, lighting a lamp to reveal a small but clean space with a bed, washstand, and chair. "It is perfect," James assured her. He set down his saddlebags, then turned to face her fully. "Clara, I want to be clear about my intentions. I am not a man who takes advantage of women. What I feel for you is real, and I want to court you properly if you will have me." Clara felt tears prick her eyes, but they were good tears this time. "I would like that very much. But James, you should know that I have nothing. No family, no property, just $60 to my name now." James closed the distance between them, taking both her hands in his. "You have yourself, and that is everything. I have a small ranch about 50 miles north of here, near Prescott. It is not fancy, just a house and some land I have been working to build up. After Sarah died, I left it in the care of a friend so I could track down Whitmore. But now that is done, and I find I have no desire to go back there alone." Clara's heart was beating so fast she felt dizzy. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that I know this is sudden, and I know we have only known each other for a few days, but I also know that what I feel for you is different from anything I have ever experienced," James said, his blue eyes intense and sincere. "Come north with me. Let me court you properly. Let me show you what your life could be like with someone who values you the way you deserve. And if, after some time, you feel the same way I do, then maybe you would consider becoming my wife." Clara knew she should be cautious. She should take time to think this through logically. But she had been cautious and logical her entire life, and where had it gotten her? She looked at James, at this good man who had fought for justice for his sister and for her, who looked at her like she was precious, and she knew her answer. "Yes," Clara said simply. "Yes to all of it." James pulled her into his arms, holding her tight, and Clara felt something settle in her chest that she had not even realized was unsettled. For the first time since her father died, she felt like she had found a home. The next morning, Clara woke early, her mind buzzing with plans and possibilities. She dressed quickly in her best dress, which was not saying much, and went downstairs to find the landlady, Mrs. Henderson, already in the kitchen preparing breakfast. "Clara dear, you are up early, Mrs. Henderson said, looking up from the biscuits she was forming. She was a plump woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a maternal manner that Clara had come to appreciate. "Mrs. Henderson, I need to give notice on my room," Clara said, the words spilling out in a rush. "I am leaving Tombstone, but I wanted to make sure you had time to find another tenant, and I can pay what I owe you now." Mrs. Henderson's eyebrows rose with interest. "Leaving? Does this have anything to do with that handsome young man you brought in last night?" "I heard you come in, though I did not say anything." Clara felt her cheeks heat. "His name is James Cordell, and yes, it does. He has asked me to go north with him to his ranch." "And you said yes, I take it?" Mrs. Henderson asked, a smile playing at her lips. "I did," Clara confirmed. "I know it seems rash, but Mrs. Henderson, I have never felt this way about anyone. And after everything that happened with Whitmore and the wages he owed me, I just want a fresh start somewhere I can build a real life." Mrs. Henderson wiped her hands on her apron and came around the table to hug Clara. "Oh, honey, you do not need to explain yourself to me. I was wondering how much longer you would survive working for that terrible man. I am glad you found someone who treats you right. When are you leaving?" "I am not sure yet. Today or tomorrow, I think. James needs to distribute the rest of the money Whitmore owed to other workers, and I need to gather my things," Clara said. "You do not have much in the way of things," Mrs. Henderson observed gently. "Let me help you. I have some dresses and supplies I can spare, and it would make me feel better knowing you are properly outfitted for the journey." Clara felt tears threaten again at the unexpected kindness. "You do not have to do that." "I know I do not have to, I want to," Mrs. Henderson said firmly. "Now go wake that young man of yours and bring him down for breakfast. He looks like he could use a proper meal." An hour later, Clara and James sat at Mrs. Henderson's kitchen table, eating scrambled eggs, biscuits, and bacon while making plans. James had already located the hotel cook and the roof repairman that morning, delivering their owed wages before dawn. Both men had been shocked and grateful, confirming James's descriptions of Whitmore's pattern of theft. "So we can leave as early as this afternoon," James said, spreading butter on a biscuit. "I have a horse, but we will need to get you one for the journey, or we could take the stage part of the way, though that would be more expensive and less direct." "I can ride," Clara said. "My father taught me when I was young. I have not been on a horse in years, but I think I remember enough." "Then we will buy you a horse and supplies," James decided. "Clara, I want you to use your wages for that. I know $60 is not a fortune, but it should be enough for a decent horse and saddle, plus some practical clothes for the journey and for ranch life." Clara hesitated. The $60 felt like a lifeline, security against an uncertain future. But James was right that she would need those things, and she was choosing to trust him. "All right. Where do we go?" They spent the rest of the morning at the livery stable and general store. The stable owner, a gruff but honest man named Tom Jeffries, helped Clara select a sturdy mare with gentle eyes and a calm disposition. The horse was 5 years old, well-trained, and used to long rides across rough terrain. Clara named her Sage because of her gray coloring. At the general store, Clara purchased 2 practical riding skirts, 3 shirtwaists, a warm coat, a bedroll, and various supplies for the trail. Mrs. Henderson contributed a leather satchel to carry Clara's belongings and insisted on packing food for their journey. By early afternoon, Clara had spent most of her $60, but she had everything she needed for her new life. As she stood in her now empty room at the boarding house, Clara felt a pang of fear mixed with excitement. She was leaving behind everything familiar, putting her trust and her future in the hands of a man she had known for less than a week. It was possibly the most reckless thing she had ever done. It was also the most alive she had felt in years. James appeared in the doorway, his saddlebags over his shoulder. "Are you ready?" Clara picked up her own bag and turned to face him. "I am ready." They rode out of Tombstone in the afternoon heat, the town growing smaller behind them until it disappeared entirely into the desert landscape. The journey north would take several days, James explained, following a route that would take them through changing terrain from desert to high country. They would camp under the stars and rely on each other in ways that would either confirm or dispel the connection they felt. That first night, they made camp near a small spring that James knew from his journey south. As Clara helped gather wood for the fire and prepare their simple meal of beans and cornbread, she was struck by how natural it felt to work alongside James. They moved in easy coordination, anticipating each other's needs without words. After they ate, they sat by the fire as the desert night closed in around them. The sky was awash with stars, more than Clara had ever seen in town, and the air had cooled to a comfortable temperature. James had spread his bedroll on one side of the fire and Clara's on the other, respecting the propriety of their situation even in the wilderness. "Tell me about your ranch," Clara said, watching the flames dance. "What is it like?" James leaned back on his hands, his face thoughtful in the firelight. "It is in a valley with a creek running through it. The house is small, just 3 rooms, but I built it myself with help from neighbors. There are pine trees on the hills around it, and in the spring, wildflowers cover the meadows. I have about 20 head of cattle right now, and I have been breaking horses to sell. It is hard work, but it is honest work, and it is mine." "It sounds beautiful," Clara said softly. "I have never seen pine trees except in pictures." "I think you will love it," James said, his voice warm with conviction. "Clara, I want you to know that when we get there, you will have your own space. The house has a separate bedroom that you can make your own. I meant what I said about courting you properly. I am not expecting anything from you except the chance to prove that I can make you happy." Clara looked across the fire at him, this man who had turned her life upside down in the best possible way. "I already believe you can make me happy. You have shown me more respect and kindness in a few days than I have experienced in months. But I appreciate your consideration, and I will not pretend I am not nervous about such a big change." James stood and walked around the fire to sit beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. "It is all right to be nervous. I am nervous too. I have not had anyone depending on me since Sarah died, and I want so badly to do right by you." Clara leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling the steady strength of him. "We will figure it out together." They sat that way for a long time, watching the fire burn down to coals, neither wanting to break the peaceful intimacy of the moment. When James finally stood to bank the fire for the night, he helped Clara to her feet and held her hand for a moment longer than necessary. "Good night, Clara," he said softly, brushing a kiss across her forehead. "Good night, James," she replied, reluctantly letting go of his hand. That night, Clara lay in her bedroll staring up at the stars, listening to the sounds of the desert and the soft breathing of James across the fire. She thought about the improbable chain of events that had brought her to this moment. If Whitmore had paid her wages as promised, she might still be trapped in that miserable situation. If James had not walked into the saloon that night, she might still be fighting a losing battle alone. The universe worked in mysterious ways, and Clara sent up a silent prayer of gratitude for the unexpected blessing of finding James. The next 4 days of travel passed in a rhythm that felt almost dreamlike to Clara. They rode through dramatic landscapes, from desert scrubland to rolling grasslands to the beginning of higher elevation forests. James proved to be a patient and attentive traveling companion, always making sure Clara was comfortable and adjusting their pace when he noticed her tiring. In turn, Clara discovered she was stronger than she had given herself credit for. Her body remembered how to ride, and though she was sore at the end of each day, she never complained. More importantly, Clara and James talked. They shared stories from their childhoods, their hopes and fears, their experiences and disappointments. Clara told James about her father, a schoolteacher who had instilled in her a love of learning and literature despite their poverty. James told Clara about growing up on a small farm in Missouri with Sarah, just the 2 of them after their parents died in a cholera outbreak. They had come west together seeking opportunity, and James blamed himself for not protecting his sister better. You were barely more than a child yourself when you lost your parents, Clara said gently one evening as they made camp. You did the best you could. Sarah's death was not your fault. It was Whitmore's. I know that in my head, James admitted, stirring the fire with a stick. But my heart has taken longer to accept it. Tracking him down, making him answer for what he did, it helped. But what helped even more was meeting you, Clara. You reminded me that I cannot spend my whole life looking backward. I have to look forward too. Then we will look forward together, Clara said, reaching across the fire to take his hand. On the afternoon of the 5th day, they crested a ridge and James pulled his horse to a stop. There, he said, pointing down into a valley below, that is home. Clara looked where he indicated and felt her breath catch. The valley was just as James had described, a green oasis nestled between forested hills. She could see the silver thread of a creek winding through the meadow, and in the center, a small wooden house with a barn beside it. Smoke rose from the chimney and Clara could see a figure moving near the barn. Someone is there, she said, surprised. That will be my friend Daniel, James explained. He has been looking after the place while I was gone. He is a good man, you will like him. They rode down into the valley, and as they approached the house, a man emerged from the barn. He was shorter than James, stocky and muscular, with red hair and a wide smile. When he saw James, he let out a whoop of excitement. Cord, you are back. I was starting to think you had gotten yourself killed chasing after that no-good Whitmore, Daniel called, striding forward to clasp James's hand in greeting. Then his eyes fell on Clara, and his expression shifted to curiosity. And you brought company. Daniel Murphy, meet Clara Brennan, James said, swinging down from his horse and moving to help Clara dismount. His hands spanned her waist, lifting her down, and Clara was aware of the strength in him and the way his touch made her pulse quicken. Clara, Daniel has been my closest friend since I came to Arizona. I trust him with my life. It is a pleasure to meet you, Miss Brennan, Daniel said, tipping his hat. Any friend of Cord's is welcome here. Actually, James said, his hand still resting protectively on Clara's back, Clara is more than a friend. She is the woman I intend to marry if she will have me. Daniel's eyebrows shot up, but his smile widened. Well now, that is news worth celebrating. Come inside, both of you. I have stew on the stove, and you can tell me everything. Over dinner in the cozy kitchen, James recounted the events in Tombstone, carefully editing out the more legally questionable aspects of his confrontation with Whitmore, but making clear that justice had been served. Daniel listened intently, occasionally interjecting with questions or exclamations. Clara liked him immediately. He had an easy warmth and a genuine quality that reminded her of her father. So Whitmore finally got what was coming to him, Daniel said with satisfaction when James finished. I am glad, Cord. You have been carrying that weight for too long. And Miss Brennan, I am sorry for what he put you through, but I am mighty glad you found Cord because of it. Please call me Clara, she said. And I am glad too, though I would not have wished the circumstances on anyone. After dinner, Daniel excused himself, saying he would stay in the barn loft for the night to give them privacy. James tried to protest, but Daniel waved him off. The loft is comfortable enough, and I have been sleeping there half the time anyway to keep an ear out for predators. Besides, you two need time to get settled. When Daniel had gone, James showed Clara around the house. It was simple but well built, with a main room that served as kitchen and sitting area and 2 bedrooms off to the side. Everything was neat and orderly, though Clara could see it needed a woman's touch. James opened the door to the smaller bedroom, which contained a bed, dresser, and a window overlooking the creek. This can be yours, James said, setting Clara's bag on the bed. I know it is not much, but you can decorate it however you like. Daniel and I can build more furniture if you need it. Clara walked to the window, looking out at the valley bathed in the golden light of sunset. The view was breathtaking, and the room felt peaceful and safe. It is perfect, James. Everything about this is perfect. James came to stand behind her, not touching but close enough that she could feel his warmth. I want you to be happy here, Clara. I want this to feel like home to you. Clara turned to face him, tilting her head back to meet his eyes. They were so close she could see the flecks of darker blue in his irises, could count the faint lines at the corners from squinting into the sun. "It already does. You make it feel like home." James cupped her face in both hands, his thumbs stroking her cheekbones. "I am going to kiss you now, Clara Brennan, and then I am going to go to my room and leave you to rest, because you deserve to be courted properly. But I need you to know that I am already halfway in love with you, and I think I have been since the moment you stood up to Whitmore despite being afraid." "Only halfway?" Clara asked, her lips curving into a smile even as her heart raced. "Give me time." "I will get all the way there soon enough," James said, and then he kissed her. This kiss was different from the one in the alley in Tombstone. It was slower, deeper, full of promise and restrained passion. Clara's hands fisted in James's shirt, pulling him closer, and she felt the rumble of his groan against her lips. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. James rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. "You are making it very difficult to be a gentleman, Clara." "Good," Clara said, surprising herself with her boldness. "Because I am already all the way in love with you, James Cordell, and I do not want to wait any longer than necessary to become your wife." James's eyes flew open, searching her face. "You mean that?" "I mean that," Clara confirmed. "I know it has only been days, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life. You are a good man, and you make me feel valued and safe and cherished. That is more than I ever dared hope for." "Then we will get married," James said decisively. "There is a minister in the town about 10 miles from here. We can ride there tomorrow if you want, or we can wait if you need more time." "Tomorrow," Clara said firmly. "I do not need more time, I just need you." James kissed her again, hard and fierce, then forced himself to step back. "Tomorrow then. But tonight, you are going to sleep in this room, and I am going to sleep in mine, and we are going to do this right." Clara laughed, feeling giddy with happiness. "You are a stubborn man, James Cordell." "And you are a remarkable woman, Clara Brennan," James replied, backing toward the door with visible reluctance. "Get some rest. Tomorrow is going to be an important day." That night, Clara lay in her new bed, listening to the creek babble outside her window and the sounds of the house settling. She thought about how drastically her life had changed in such a short time. A week ago, she had been desperate and hopeless, trapped in a situation with no apparent escape. Now she was about to marry a man who loved her, in a beautiful valley that would become her home. It was like something out of a story, too good to be true, but it was true. It was her life now. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Clara woke to find James already up, making coffee in the kitchen. He had clearly made an effort with his appearance, wearing clean clothes and with his hair neatly combed. When he saw Clara emerge from her room, his face lit up with a smile that made her heart flutter. "Good morning," he said, pouring her a cup of coffee. "Did you sleep well?" "Better than I have in months," Clara admitted, accepting the cup gratefully. "Where is Daniel?" "Out checking the cattle. He knows our plans for today and said he would stay out of our way," James said. "Are you ready for this, Clara?" "Because if you have changed your mind, or if you need more time, I will understand." Clara set down her coffee and crossed to him, taking his hands in hers. "I have not changed my mind. I want to marry you today, James. I want to start our life together." James squeezed her hands, his expression both relieved and joyful. "Then let us go get married." They rode to the small town together, arriving mid-morning. The town was not much more than a collection of buildings clustered around a main street, but it had everything they needed. James led Clara to a small white church at the edge of town, where they found the minister tending his garden. Reverend Thomas was an elderly man with kind eyes and a gentle manner. When James explained their situation, he smiled warmly. "Young love is a beautiful thing. I would be honored to marry you. Do you have rings?" James looked stricken, clearly not having thought that far ahead. "No, we do not. I am sorry, Clara. I should have planned better." "It does not matter," Clara said quickly. "We do not need rings right now." But Reverend Thomas held up a hand. "Wait here a moment." He disappeared into the small house beside the church and returned a few minutes later with a simple gold band. "This was my wife's wedding ring. She passed 2 years ago, and I think she would want it to go to a young bride starting her life. It is not fancy, but it is given with love." Clara felt tears well up at the kindness. "Are you sure? I could not possibly take something so precious." "I am sure," the Reverend said firmly. "Margaret would have liked you. Now shall we begin?" The ceremony was simple but deeply moving. Standing in the small church with sunlight streaming through the windows, Clara and James exchanged vows. When James slipped the gold band onto Clara's finger, his hands were shaking slightly, and she loved him even more for the evidence of how much this moment meant to him. When Reverend Thomas pronounced them husband and wife, James kissed Clara with such tender passion that she forgot to be embarrassed by the public display. They left the church as Mr. and Mrs. Cordell, and Clara felt like she was floating. They stopped at the general store to send a telegram to Mrs. Henderson, letting her know that Clara was safely married and settled. Then they rode back to the ranch, taking their time and savoring the perfect day. When they arrived home, Daniel was waiting with a grin and a bottle of whiskey he had been saving. "Congratulations to the newlyweds. I knew Cord had good sense, but I did not know he was smart enough to move this fast." That evening, the three of them shared a celebratory dinner. Daniel regaled them with stories of his own mishaps and adventures, keeping the mood light and festive. But as the evening wore on, he excused himself again to the barn, clapping James on the shoulder and kissing Clara's cheek, before disappearing into the darkness. Alone for the first time as husband and wife, James and Clara stood in the kitchen, suddenly shy with each other despite everything they had shared. James cleared his throat. "Clara, I want you to know that there is no expectation tonight. You have been through so much in such a short time, and if you need space or time to adjust, I will understand." Clara stepped close to him, placing her hands on his chest. She could feel his heart beating fast beneath her palms. "James, I married you today because I love you and I want to build a life with you. That includes tonight, unless you do not want to." James laughed, the sound slightly strangled. "Clara, I have been thinking about nothing else since the moment I met you, but I want to do right by you. I want this to be good for you." "Then take me to bed, husband," Clara said, standing on her toes to kiss him, "and show me what our future looks like." James needed no further encouragement. He swept Clara into his arms, carrying her to his bedroom, which was now their bedroom. He set her down gently beside the bed, and then his hands were in her hair, unpinning it until it fell in waves around her shoulders. "You are so beautiful," he murmured, his fingers threading through the long strands. Clara worked at the buttons of his shirt, her hands trembling slightly with nerves and anticipation. "So are you." They undressed each other slowly, learning the contours and textures of bodies that would now belong to each other. When they finally came together, it was with tenderness and passion intertwined, a joining that was both physical and spiritual. Clara had never experienced anything like it, had never understood how being with someone could feel like coming home and flying free at the same time. Afterwards, they lay tangled together in the moonlight streaming through the window, James's arms wrapped protectively around Clara. She traced patterns on his chest, feeling utterly content and safe. "I love you," James said softly, kissing the top of her head. "I know I have said it before, but I want to keep saying it. I love you, Clara Cordell." "I love you too," Clara replied, smiling at the sound of her new name. "I cannot believe this is my life now. A week ago I was scrubbing floors and going hungry. Now I am married to the most wonderful man I have ever met, in a beautiful home, starting a new life." "You deserve every good thing," James said firmly, "and I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure you know that." Clara turned in his arms to face him. "We are going to spend the rest of our lives making each other happy. That is how marriage works, right? We take care of each other." "Right," James agreed, kissing her softly. "Starting now." The weeks that followed were busy and joyful. Daniel stayed on as a ranch hand, and Clara quickly discovered she loved the rhythm of ranch life. She learned to garden, to preserve food for the winter, to help with the horses and cattle. James was patient in teaching her, and they worked side by side every day, growing closer with each shared task and conversation. Clara also put her organizational skills to use, bringing order to the household accounts and supplies. She wrote to Mrs. Henderson regularly, sharing her happiness and gratitude. The older woman wrote back with warmth, sharing news of Tombstone and expressing her pleasure at Clara's good fortune. As autumn turned to winter, the valley transformed into a wonderland of snow-covered meadows and frost-laden trees. Clara discovered she loved the cold weather, the way the fireplace made their home cozy, the excuse to stay close to James on long winter nights. They talked about their future, about expanding the ranch, about the family they wanted to build. One evening in late December, as they sat by the fire after dinner, Clara told James the news she had been suspecting for a few weeks. "I think I am with child." James's face went through a series of expressions, from shock to wonder to pure joy. "Are you sure?" "Fairly sure," Clara said, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. "I have not had my courses since before we married, and I have been feeling strange in the mornings." Mrs. Henderson included information about such things in one of her letters, and all the signs match. James knelt in front of her chair, placing his hands over hers on her stomach. "A baby, our baby. Clara, I am going to be a father." "And I am going to be a mother," Clara said, feeling tears of happiness stream down her face. "Are you happy about this?" "Happy." James laughed, pulling her into his arms. "Clara, I am overjoyed. Terrified, but overjoyed. We are going to have a family." They held each other for a long time, both marveling at the miracle of the life growing inside Clara. Later that night, James was even more tender and careful with her, treating her like she was made of glass. "I am not going to break," Clara said with amusement, running her fingers through his hair as they lay in bed. "I am pregnant, not fragile." "I know," James said, his hand splayed protectively over her stomach. "But you are carrying something infinitely precious, and I cannot help wanting to protect you both." "We are lucky to have you," Clara said softly. "This baby is going to have the best father." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the winter and into the spring. As Clara's belly grew, so did her happiness. James was attentive and loving, constantly making sure she was comfortable and cared for. Daniel built a beautiful cradle from pine wood, carving delicate patterns into the headboard. The community they had slowly been getting to know rallied around them, with neighboring ranch wives sharing advice and baby clothes. In late June, on a warm evening with the windows open to let in the breeze, Clara went into labor. James sent Daniel riding for the midwife while he stayed with Clara, holding her hand and murmuring encouragement as the contractions grew stronger and closer together. The midwife, a capable woman named Mrs. Larson, arrived just in time to help Clara deliver a healthy baby boy. When James first held his son, tears streamed down his face unashamedly. "He is perfect, Clara. You are perfect. Thank you for this gift." Clara, exhausted but elated, smiled at the sight of her husband cradling their child. "What should we name him?" James looked down at the tiny face, then back at Clara. "What about Samuel? It was my father's name." "Samuel Cordell," Clara tested the name and nodded. "It is perfect. Hello, Samuel." "Welcome to the world, little one." The next months were a blur of sleepless nights and profound joy. Samuel was a good baby, healthy and alert, with his mother's green eyes and his father's dark hair. James proved to be a natural father, patient and gentle, rising in the night to help with feedings and changes despite having to work the ranch during the day. On their first wedding anniversary, James surprised Clara by taking her to town. He led her to a small shop where he had commissioned something special. The shopkeeper brought out a beautiful silver locket on a delicate chain. "Open it," James encouraged, his eyes bright with anticipation. Inside the locket were two tiny photographs, one of James and one of Samuel. "This way we are always close to your heart," James said, fastening the locket around Clara's neck, "just as you are always close to ours." Clara touched the locket, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of the gift. James, it is beautiful, but you did not have to do this. I wanted to, James said. I wanted you to have something that shows how much you mean to us. Clara, this year with you has been the happiest of my life. You took a broken man seeking vengeance and turned him back into someone who could love and hope and dream. You gave me a home and a family. I can never repay that. You do not need to repay anything, Clara said, cupping his face in her hands. We gave those things to each other. That is what love is. They returned to the ranch to find Daniel entertaining Samuel, making silly faces that had the baby giggling. The four of them, the little family they had built, shared dinner on the porch as the sun set over the valley. Clara looked around at the faces of the people she loved, at the home she had helped create, and felt a sense of peace and belonging she had never imagined possible. That night, after Samuel was asleep in his cradle and Daniel had retired to the bunkhouse they had built for him, Clara and James lay in bed talking about their future. The ranch was doing well, turning a steady profit. They had dreams of expanding, of maybe adding some sheep or buying more land. But more than that, they wanted to keep building their family. I want Samuel to have siblings, James said, his hand resting on Clara's hip. I want this house full of noise and laughter and life. What do you think? I think that sounds wonderful, Clara agreed, snuggling closer to him. Though perhaps we could wait a bit before having another baby. Samuel is not even 6 months old yet, James chuckled. Fair enough, though I quite enjoy the process of trying to make babies. Clara swatted his chest playfully. James Cordell, you are incorrigible. And you love me for it, James said, kissing her. I do, Clara confirmed. I love everything about you. As the years passed, the Cordell family grew and thrived. Samuel was joined by a daughter, Margaret, named for the Reverend's late wife. Then came another son, Daniel, named for the friend who had become like family. The ranch expanded, becoming one of the most successful in the territory. James earned a reputation as an honest businessman who treated his workers fairly and always paid what was owed, a legacy born from the injustice he had fought against. Clara became known in the community as well for her kindness and intelligence. She started teaching the children of neighboring ranchers, using the skills her father had taught her. She never forgot where she had come from, never took for granted the security and happiness she had found. Every time she put on her locket, she remembered the terrified, desperate woman she had been in Tombstone, and she marveled at how far she had come. On their 10th wedding anniversary, the whole family traveled back to Tombstone. Clara wanted to visit Mrs. Henderson, to show her the family she had helped make possible by her kindness during those dark days. The town had changed in the intervening years, growing and prospering, but the boarding house was still there. Mrs. Henderson, now grayer but just as warm, cried when she saw Clara with her family. Look at you. Oh, my dear girl, I am so happy for you and these beautiful children. James, you have taken good care of our Clara. She takes care of me just as much, James replied, his arm around Clara's waist. We take care of each other. That night, as they stayed in a hotel in Tombstone, Clara stood at the window looking out at the town. James came to stand behind her, wrapping his arms around her. What are you thinking about? About how different my life could have been, Clara said softly. If you had not walked into that saloon that night, if you had not seen me and decided to help, I would probably still be trapped or worse. But I did walk in, James said, kissing her temple. And you were brave enough to trust me to take a chance on a stranger with a crazy plan. We found each other, Clara, at exactly the right moment. That is not coincidence. That is fate. I believe you are right, Clara said, turning in his arms to face him, and I am grateful every single day for our fate. 20 years after that first meeting in the Silver Spur Saloon, Clara and James sat on the porch of their expanded ranch house, watching their grandchildren play in the yard. Samuel had married a lovely woman from town and now ran the cattle operation. Margaret had surprised them all by becoming a teacher, traveling to Phoenix to attend a training college before returning to open a school in the growing community. Young Daniel was following in his father's footsteps, learning every aspect of the ranch with the intention of taking it over one day. "Can you believe it has been 20 years?" Clara asked, her head resting on James's shoulder. They were both graying now, with lines on their faces earned from years of laughter and hard work. "Best 20 years of my life," James said, taking her hand and threading his fingers through hers. "Though I have to admit, there are times I can hardly remember life before you. It is like my life truly started the day I met you." "I feel the same way," Clara admitted. "Everything before you was just preparation, just surviving until I could find you." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the valley in shades of gold and amber. The creek still babbled peacefully. The meadows still bloomed with wildflowers in the spring. The pine trees still whispered in the wind. Their home, their family, their life together had been built on a foundation of justice sought and love found unexpectedly. It was a story Clara had told her children and would tell her grandchildren, a reminder that sometimes the worst moments lead to the best futures. "Do you ever think about Whitmore?" Clara asked suddenly, surprised by her own question. James was quiet for a moment, considering. "Sometimes, I wonder where he ended up if he ever changed his ways. But mostly, I think about how he inadvertently gave me the greatest gift of my life by bringing you and me together. If he had paid your wages on time, you might never have needed my help. We might never have met. So in a strange way, I suppose I should thank him." "That is a very generous perspective," Clara said, smiling, "though I am not sure I am quite that forgiving." "You do not have to be," James assured her. "The point is, his attempt to hurt you backfired spectacularly. You got everything he tried to deny you and more. You got a life full of love and meaning and family. That is the best revenge." Clara nodded, knowing he was right. She had one in every way that mattered. She had a husband who cherished her, children who brought her joy, a home that was truly hers, and a legacy she could be proud of. She had never gotten those $60 back, but she had gotten something infinitely more valuable. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, their children called them inside for dinner. James stood, pulling Clara to her feet, and they walked hand in hand into their home, filled with the warmth of family and the love that had sustained them through 2 decades of building a life together. That night, lying in bed, Clara thought about how to tell their story if someone ever asked. It would start with injustice, with a woman denied her wages and a man seeking revenge for his sister's death. But it would end with love, with a family built on respect and partnership and unwavering devotion. It was a story of how sometimes the worst circumstances lead to the best outcomes, of how standing up for yourself can change your entire life, and of how the right person appearing at the right moment can turn everything around. It was their story, and Clara would not change a single word of it.